Hey everyone, and welcome to another Atomic Mass live stream transmission. I'm Will Shick, and today we are going to be finishing up the man, the myth, the legend, our Magneto. Eric or Max, depending on where you are in the timeline and how you're feeling on the day. I'm still an Eric guy myself, but Max is definitely the name that he probably should go by nowadays. I hope you all are doing great out there. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. We are pretty close to actually finished on this Magneto, so I bet we'll be able to knock out the rest of him today and maybe even get to work on some of that wonderful debris that is being magnetically crushed around him. If you missed last week, be sure to check that out. That's how we did all of the white costume. So we are going for that, I call it the Marvel Now costume. This also is really representative of where he is currently with the House and Powers of X and the current Hickman run and stuff like that. So he's wearing the white costume. This is kind of the redeemed Magneto. Typically when he's in the white, he's a good guy, more or less. So we decided to do that with this Magneto, just to have some fun and to challenge ourselves with painting white. So be sure to check that out if you want to see how we got to this point. Today we're going to be doing a lot of the detailing and the piping. We're going to add some blue-black to this fella so that everything looks really nice and we get some sharp contrast. We'll do his face. And we'll just go from there. So we're just going to play around and have a good time. So here we go. Start things off. We're going to kick things off today using this Anthracite Gray. It's a nice blue, kind of black gray color that will provide a nice little foundation for our dark black lining, which we see on the suit. We'll probably play with some metallic colors too. I'm kind of like really feeling maybe doing some blue metallics, taking a couple of liberties as far as color scheme on this Magneto, because obviously the costume that we chose to do in sculpt, well, it works great for the white costume. It's not identical, it's not one-to-one. It does have different piping and detailing. So we're gonna play around a little bit today with that. But this is where our creativity and our imagination kind of kicks in, and we're able to kind of make some decisions. Ooh. Use our finger to get rid of that. So we're going to make a couple of decisions, some distinctions. We're going to come up with a Marvel Now inspired Magneto. And I always like to use that word inspired because obviously what we're doing here is not one-to-one, and that's kind of the fun of it. So we're just going to kind of carefully go through and we're going to get this piping down. And this is going to add a bit of like color and definition, and we're going to split out some of that white. This Anthracite Gray is just such a nice color because it's so rich, and it does really well with a black wash to go over. So I think I might paint a little bit on this, but mostly it's just a lot of brush control and quick use of either my finger or my scrubby brush if I mess up, because I would prefer not to go back through and do that white again. So this is one of those moments where being a little extra careful and considerate is going to save you a lot of like headache and heartache. I've seen that several lucky individuals have posted on social media that their X-Men have arrived. I'm really excited for Friday, when I think pretty much everyone will have a chance to go to their store and grab those. I know Josh sent out a few additional early copies for folks who do streaming and stuff like that. So I'm really excited to see these characters start popping up on MCP tables. See how you all take them and integrate them in your current collections. See the awesome paint jobs that I'm sure are coming for these. This is probably my favorite time. Release week is always an exciting time. It's exciting for you all because, you know, you've been waiting forever to get your hands on these. And it's really exciting for us because even though, like, we do work way far in the future, it's one of the weird things about creating games, and especially working in miniatures like this. Like, you know, we're so far ahead because of production timelines and everything that on the one hand, like, we're so far beyond the X-Men, and yet on the other hand, it's like, oh my gosh, they're finally coming out. Like, how exciting is that to actually get to see everyone finally get to put their hands on it. You know, we hope that we did everything well and the hype will be lived up to. But, you know, the big thing, I think, for us is just seeing all those awesome paint jobs, you know. Watching what people do with them. Watching all the Thanoses over the last several months has been awesome. Watching all the Kingpins over the last month has just been amazing. It's so much fun. And it's so inspiring to be like, oh man, I can't wait to go back and do this or that. It's a really exciting time for us. Mutant Genesis OP kit coming. Well, so we talked about this last week. There is no such thing as a Mutant Genesis OP kit. That was kind of a placeholder thing that somehow wound up on solicitations, and there was a little error. There is an organized play kit that is coming out next year that kind of became what Mutant Genesis was spec'd out to be. But it is not this year. Obviously, even if it was, you know, the global pandemic has kind of thrown everything for a loop, especially when it comes to like in-store play and stuff. And we only just started rolling out a lot of our organized play with Vibranium Heist last month. So Mutant Genesis kit, no Mutant Genesis kit. It is the official name. I'll just spoil it. It's Mutant Masterworks. And it will be out next year. That's probably all I can really say about that kit, but it should be really exciting. It's kind of set to come out with the second wave of X products of mutant characters, because like we talked about during the Gen Con announcement, we really wanted to make sure that these X-Men and Brotherhood characters got out this year in time for the celebration of the 1-year anniversary of the game. And so that required us to kind of take some hard looks and work kind of extra diligently to make sure that the global pandemic didn't change anything we were hoping to do and accomplish with that. But it did mean that certain things in terms of release schedule timing and stuff got a little changed. So there is a bit of a gap between kind of this first wave of mutants and the following wave of mutants, and that organized play kit is set for that second wave of mutant characters. There are some really cool organized play things coming out though next year. We got a lot of really cool stuff coming actually, and we'll be talking more about that stuff as we get a little closer to the new year, but it should be a good time. So hopefully that answers the question, maybe not in the way that you were hoping for, but that is where we currently are. Whoop. You see, we're just kind of going through and scoping out kind of where we want this blue-black to be. We do have a couple of determinations to make, like, do we want to take the boots and do them that way? I'm kind of not entirely sure that I want to, though. I kind of like where the boots and the gloves wound up with the blue. I do think that I'm going to do the collar in this color, though. So we're just going to, like, knock this out a little bit. And you see that I did thin down my paint to be kind of like a wash consistency for this collar part, because I have those nice rivets and stuff. So having the paint kind of go back to that traditional wash consistency, even though we've covered most of it with our white from last week, will just help us with the washes, define and pick out those things and make everything look nice and neat. You can tell that I'm taking a lot of time and care going around these areas because I really don't want to have to go back and redo any of the white. If you were with us last week, you know that this whole thing was a really big challenge for me from a hobby level because I don't like painting white this way. I usually try to avoid it as much as possible, and then when I do dive into white, it's usually with an airbrush where I can just cheat, quote unquote, and I don't have to worry about like getting good coverage and stuff. So one of the jokes has always been like Dallas always does white costume schemes whenever we do our streams, and I'll do anything else. But I really wanted to take the opportunity and kind of push myself with a challenge I wasn't super comfortable with, because that's the only way that you get better. So being able to do that here with you all, watching and keeping me honest in a way, just kind of show you that not everything is supernatural or comes right away, right? There's a lot of work and process and mistakes and everything else that goes into it, and so you just kind of make the best of what you got. I mean, I feel like we want more blue, but I'm not sure where I want to put it. Maybe we do it on the gloves. We're going to do it on the gloves. We're going to do it on the gloves. Why not? Again, this is very inspired by costuming, because that Marvel Now Magneto definitely has different kind of gloves and different kind of suit piping, so we're just making decisions here that are going to make our final miniature look really cool. Having these bands being that blue black will really give them that extra definition of color pop. So. Can't see what I'm doing, but I'm totally painting these lines here just very carefully. Alright. 1 second here. Alright, so in. Keep rocking it out. Okay, so we got those. Come over here and get these gloves. Both of those colors. So let's come back here. This little band under the glove itself looks like it's attached. Fill that stuff out. So I think everything has been shown off from these boxes now. So our friends over at On Tabletop, I know, showed the 2 Crisis cards that come with these sets. So you got your Mutant Senator one, which is one of my favorites, like Save the Senator. And then of course you have your Mutant Madman Sets Dangerous Traps in the Park, which was kind of a fun nod to a fairly classic X-Men villain. A little bit of a also nod to how the Bugle isn't always super accurate in its reporting. Sensational headlines are J. Jonah Jameson's bread and butter. As you kind of go through this stuff, obviously you're going to wind up in a situation where you're probably going to make a couple mistakes, and that's okay. If you don't get to it with your scrubby brush, you can always come back through and fix it later. As Dallas loves to say, part of miniatures painting is the fine art of correcting one's mistakes. And then, of course, as the sage Bob Ross would tell you, there are no mistakes, there are only happy little accidents. Take your pick. Either way, you're going to run into points where you're just going to have to fix stuff, and that's okay. It's a fairly easy process to do. And sometimes you're going to make mistakes and you can just leave them. Again, this guy isn't going into a competition painting. He's not looking to win the worthy. He's just going on a tabletop. He wants to look cool. And that means that we can kind of expect that most people are just going to view him from arm's length. So there's a lot of things that we can do to speed up the process, to make everything go a little smoother on our end as we paint him. We don't have to worry about certain things, like especially anywhere below the waist. People are not really going to be likely to spend a lot of time looking at his boots or his feet. So you'll notice, especially a little secret, if you ever see Dallas's painted miniatures in person, he almost never paints the boots. He just leaves them dark. But there's no highlighting, there's no real shading going on there, because you're just not going to see that. Your eyes are going to look at that. So why spend the time? Places that you really want to spend a lot of time on are the face, the head and the shoulders, the neck, those kinds of things, are places where the miniature is designed to draw your eye. And to be honest, most miniature design is all about the face and the head and shoulders, because that's, as people, that's where we want to look first. So, do we want to make that glove? I think we do. I'm just going to go all in here. I'm going to make these hands totally blue gloved up. Just add that extra color differentiator, because we do have a lot of white on this guy. And again, our gray is, anthracite gray is really blue, especially when it's thinned out, but we're going to go back through and just use a really nice black glaze to kind of reclaim and pull everything back down into kind of a more traditional black. This is similar to what Dallas did on his Magneto, which he did in the black X-Men blue color scheme. A lot of black and red, and then some magenta go. You can see everything's coming together. We're getting that differentiation going on. So camera buzz. I don't have any camera buzz. I did return a webcam, Simone, because you kept complaining about how it didn't match my mouth. So it looked like a Toho movie with a dub, like I was being English dubbed. Man, I really kind of want to keep those boots, but at the same time, whatever. We're doing it. I just think this is going to make a stronger piece. So even though I like those white boots and what we did with highlighting them, we're getting rid of it. We're changing on the fly. We are making decisions that we will live with now. Dallas likes the darker boots. I'm not entirely sold on it, but I think this boy just needs some extra color. He needs extra color in his life. So that's what we're going to do. Oh yeah, Simone is very famous. She carved herself quite a name. Just gonna come back around. Bootstraps. I'm not even going to ask like how Magneto gets into these boots because they seem really impractical to me. But then again, I suppose I've seen some high fashion boots that are similar. I still ask the same question though. How are you getting into these super spaghetti strap boots and why? I think that was one of my favorite moments from the Avengers video game that came out not too long ago, when Tony Stark's like, yeah, you look ridiculous. We all do. It's part of the gig. I was like, so true. Oh, Tony, so true. Pulling at those heartstrings. It's all about the look. Alright, so there we go. Our darker boots. And the idea that we were going to keep those white is now gone. I'm liking that though. It gives us a nice composition. So we got blue on the helmet, blue on the hands, the blue collar. We're just going to come through. So I think that's a pretty good representation of our Marvel Now Magneto. We're going to let that dry. We'll come back to our Anthracite Gray and worry about it later. We're going to do some flesh on his face. So this is just going to be a mix of basic flesh, a little bit of Ishtar Pink from Fantasy and Games, and a little bit of Flesh Wash from Vallejo. I'm just going to do our best to kind of lay it in here and not have it spill out of the helmet. We're going to let our wash do the job of splitting the separation lines from the face to the helmet. So if I get a little spillover, it's okay. I can always use my secondary brush if I make a big mistake. Kind of just using that size 0 brush right now, which has the best point. And really that's the only reason why I'm using such a small brush. I've had 2s and stuff that have really good points. But at the moment, in my painting arsenal, that size 0 just has the best has the sharpest point on it, which allows me to really do that detail work. But all you really need when it comes down to it is a really good point. As long as you have a really good point, that gives you the vast majority of your brush control. And then things like a size 2 gives you a bigger barrel, so you don't have to go back and refill your paint as much, which can be insanely helpful. So you see I'm having to reload that brush because it's so small 2 to 3 times just to do that neck. So there we go, first layer of skin down. Kind of let that dry, we'll come back. I think we're going to move on to the metal. We'll start with some black metal from scale, which will give us a nice kind of dark, gritty start to our metal. It'll contrast really nice with our bright whites on this Magneto. We can finally shift to a bigger brush now, because I don't need to worry so much about the point. And we're just going to start layering stuff through. You can see that I cheated here. If you look really close, you'll see that I didn't even bother about getting the back of his foot. I might go back and fix that. I might just leave it alone, because honestly, you're never really going to see it unless you pick him up and start spinning him around really close. And it just means that I have less likelihood of like making a mistake on the back of the cloak. Yeah, the knock-knock joke was pretty good. Yeah, it was pretty good. So we can go back through and kind of like use washes and some brown wash and some black wash and some blue wash, purple wash, green wash, all kinds of things to shade the metal and just give it some different like feel and look depending on what we want. But it all kind of starts with the same base coat, so we're just going to lay this on really quick. You can get pretty crazy with metallics, which is pretty fun. Of course, we're doing true metallic, not non-metallic metal, so the people are never satisfied. That's all right. I don't think we are either. I mean, as much as Josh likes to sigh about it. You don't have to be satisfied with anything. You need to be, you know, be happy with what you have, but that doesn't mean that you have to be satisfied. You can always, you know, want to be better, want to improve, want your favorite character, want whatever, right? Like, that's okay. It's only when those things start to dominate and overtake the joy of your life, the kind of your mentality, when they become obsessions, that's when it's a problem. But yeah, I can't honestly say that I've ever been very satisfied in my life either. I've always wanted to improve a skill or get something more, and that's fine. I think that's the human condition, right? Make the world a better place. Just put that passion and energy in things that are positives rather than negatives, and avoid that downfall of like having what you want drive your happiness, because there's two different things. You can be perfectly happy and not be satisfied. I think that's, you know, most people are, you look at it and you're like, man, they're just happy people. It's like, well, yeah, but they still want more for their life. They want more for their loved ones, more for their world, more for their skills, all that stuff. Like, everybody can want more, but just because you don't have more doesn't change or shouldn't affect how happy you are with your life, how content you are with the things you do have. Now, we're at the philosophical portion of our live stream. An apocalypse reveal. Wow. I mean, Josh could do that, I guess, if he just worked really, really, really fast and then wanted to have a lot of people like really unhappy with him all of a sudden. He could just magic things up. Let's be honest though, Josh isn't the guy who's he's not gonna drop an apocalypse pack if he's just whipping something up for everybody. It's gonna be something crazy like Stiltman or Bessie the Hell Cow, or it's gonna be something out of left field. Like, it's gonna be a thing that you never saw coming if it's Josh. He is the patron saint of unknown characters, underrepresented characters. I did base coat him 1178. I did base coat him this Magneto with light gray. I actually started with my dark gray like normal, and then I zenith primed light gray. I used a pretty heavy coat of light gray, and then I just built up. First we shaded the colors down because white is defined by its shadows rather than its highlights, so we used some paints to shade them down, which you can see if you watched the stream from last week. And then we reclaimed a bunch of the colors with progressive stages of white highlight, which brought us to where we are now, which is pretty good. And then I think the one thing that I've been considering, but I haven't done yet, is scale 75 does have a nice white ink, which you can turn into kind of like a nice white glaze. And then glazing that over all the areas just to kind of like pull everything and tie everything together. But now that I'm looking at them with these other colors, I feel like that may not be necessary. So we'll see how I feel. Let's just go ahead and just hit this metal stuff on the base too while we have our steel out, just to make things simple. This weird little thing, and then this piece of metal over here. Knock those out. So yeah, like I said, a lot of the work was an hour. I mean, you know, one of the nice things about superhero costumes is that they're usually pretty straightforward once you get the main colors down, and obviously the biggest part of Magneto is either white or magenta or whatever that bodysuit color is going to be. So we spent a lot of time last week. Actually, we spent all the time last week just working on that white, so that we could get to this point this week where we just kind of get to knock out all the easy kill stuff. So I do use a number 2 Winsor Newton watercolor brush for pretty much everything except for a lot of my detail work or smaller areas. I do like to use the 0, which is another watercolor brush as well. But the 2 is really good for like almost everything that you need to do. I just like to use the 0 for like piping. Like I'll use it for the piping lines because again it also has the nicest point out of all the brushes that I have left, and that points is really important. And I find that I just have a little bit better brush control when I need to go in and do when I need to do fine detail stuff. So it's kind of all up to whatever you're comfortable with and what works well. But if you have a really nice point on your brush, then you can maybe kind of see those points and those bristles. So both those brushes come to a really nice point, which allows you a lot of control. We're just going to go in with some flesh wash. We're going to knock out some shading on Magneto's face. Now that that flesh has had some time to dry, make sure it's kind of heavy around the mask. We're going to let that be kind of our first marker of separation, our dark lining. And then when we go back through with our black glaze here really quick, we'll be able to knock that out. So that gave him kind of a nice tan. Okay, so we're going to grab a little bit of black ink from scale. We're going to grab a little bit of black glaze from Vallejo, which I really like. And we're going to grab some just flat black paint. We're going to mix those together and kind of create a little glaze for our blues to bring those down. We're going to use a lot of glaze medium to let them stick. We're just going to shade these down just a little bit. And I want my glaze medium. I'm going to switch back to my more detailed brush because I do have to do this over the piping. Just gonna get started. I never throw away my brushes, for those talking about in chat. Like, even when the brush is clearly dead and well beyond saving, I save it. Just can't do it. They just live in the retirement brush cup. Every once in a while, one of them gets like brought out as a dry brush or something, and I'll be like, oh, I need a dry brush really quick. It's like, well, clearly that one. Go to the brush retirement cup. Find new life as a dry brush. Or a mixing brush. Every once in a while I'll use them as mixing brushes from time to time. But that's typically rarer. It's a little thinner than I want it. So I'm just going to dab that up. So I'm basically just going through, doing a really quick black wash across all this blue area to kind of tone it down a little bit. If you wanted to, you could use like Vallejo black wash, which is already kind of set up and ready to go. We'll do the same thing. We mixed ours out of the colors I talked about. But we want this to be pretty thin. Like, I don't want it to dominate that blue or take over all the control. I'm kind of hoping that it'll do a little bit of dark lining for me, so we're calling those cracks and crevices like a wash, and it'll just tint our blue back a little bit, that blue-gray back. Give it a bit more of a darker black feel to it. But I do want to maintain that blue because it's a nice, cool color next to that white. Remember that we shaded our white with kind of a greenish gray. That rainy day has a lot of green to it. It's kind of a green tinge. So that blue will play really well with that. That blue-gray will play well with that green-gray. And so we kind of want to maintain those colors just to have that in our overall composition here. So choosing color choice and stuff, thinking about how everything complements and pairs against each other can make a really big difference too in the final look and feel of your paint job. And that's something that, you know, a lot of people are like, well, I don't really understand color theory. Well, I don't either. So just let your eyes guide you. Just, you know, people typically have a pretty good sense of color and what matches and what doesn't. That's why a lot of people can look at the same art piece and be like, oh, I see beauty there. I see this, that, or the other thing. Because our brains interpret that stuff similarly. And there are always outliers. There are people who find things like, you know, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. As long as you love it, Doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. You see how that's just kind of like bringing that blue down just a little bit. So it's a little less blue and a little more black. I'm just using that secondary brush to kind of help as we run around detailing on the mask, the helmet. Get a little too wild. I'm kind of letting that black go into those eye sockets just to darken them down and help let them stand out. Kind of like guiding and letting the paint really knows what it wants to do. We talk about this a lot too. So it's more about just kind of overall guiding it rather than forcing it to go into places, because it'll go where you want it to. Like this wash really wants to find those cracks and crevices. It wants to really deepen up those recesses, tint those tops, so I don't have to worry about pushing it where I want it to go. If I just let the brush kind of touch the miniature, it's going to do its thing, and from there I can just go back and adjust with my clean blending brush. And I will say, since we were talking about brush sizes and stuff, whenever you have like your blending brush, you almost always just want that blending brush to be a size 2. It works really, really well. There's very few times where I'm like, oh, I need a smaller blending brush. Like, just let the blending brush be big, it'll help out so much. And so again, I'm also letting this like black wash kind of act as a dark lining. So I'm letting it spill over kind of the top and give me those nice dark edges that'll help separation between the two different areas. The real trick is just make sure that it doesn't go too much. I don't want it to fill up the areas in between the boots. I just want it to be just enough that it is providing that nice line of separation, which will help everything go. So we can see, there we are, looking really good. We can take some of this color now, switch to our size 2, and we can wash this over our steel. Get it in on the girder and stuff and give this a quick wash, and then once it dries, if we wanted to, we go back and dry brush just a little bit of steel back on, a little brighter steel. We could do another brown wash to make it look a little dingy and dirty, but at its base, one of the fun things about metals is you can get a really good metallic look if you just simply do a base coat, a wash, and then dry brush a highlight. And you can call it good. You can be pretty thick with it and just kind of moosh it on. Especially because this steel has been inside of a building probably for most of its life. So who knows how gritty and grimy and gross it is. Probably very. I'm just going to go over the whole. And I'm just going to go over the whole base of this. It'll provide a nice little shade for when I go back through and recolor the grit and the building grime that's sitting there. Just use that as a pre-shade, if you will. Alright. So it's looking pretty good. Just grab a little gray. Go through and grab this little piece of what I assume is masonry, still stuck on this rebar. Paint that in really quick. Through. So, how many of you all are excited for Inhumans? Now that Josh has been going crazy this week. I know X-Men are coming, and that's a huge thing, but I know there's some Inhuman folks out there. There always are. They always are. I'm excited. 2021 is going to be pretty fun. We got a couple of fun presents for you in December. Like we said, we're taking the month off from releases, so we're going to kind of have that month to just hang out, catch up on our painting cues, do a lot of really cool painting, some playing, hang out with family, get prepped for the new year, where we have a lot of really cool stuff coming. So, I'm going to go back in. We're just going to grab our flat black here. We're going to knock out. This Magneto is kind of growling at us, so just quickly kind of go in and darken up the mouth. So we can add some teeth. We'll come back through with our skin tone. Kind of reclaim all those areas now that we have a flesh wash there. We have a black wash there going on. So it's gotten pretty grimy and dark and muddy. So we're just going to come through and we're just going to pick out. So the nose, the chin, got the area around the eye. Try not to, affect any of the dark lining parts. So this is kind of where a good point in a lot of different angles will help. That face can be kind of tricky to get to. But luckily it doesn't take a whole lot to make him kind of pop out. And we can always go back through and touch up the areas that might get a little bit of flesh on them that we didn't want flesh tones on. Also, we can trust in the fact that most people probably won't see any of these areas as well. Spot right here. I'll come over here. So there we go. Looking pretty good, pretty good, pretty good. Now if we wanted to, we go back through and we could start highlighting all these blue areas and stuff, but because this Magneto is really just meant to go on the tabletop, and I'm pretty happy with the results where we are with our washes. You can see that we have natural highlighting from all the washes we did on the little like rivets and stuff, so we could accentuate those a little bit if we wanted to. I'm going to show you really quick how I would do that. So I would take my Anthracite Gray, I would take Arctic Blue, which is a great highlight to it. It's a really light blue gray. Kind of just mix those together to create like a nice little bright spot highlight. I can just hop in and just kind of hit the very tip tops of those bolts. Come back in and kind of blend out some stuff on the helmet too. Just kind of get those little like zings of light. So where your blending brush just comes in handy, because you can just kind of like smooth out those little touches. Just kind of get those little sharp highlights. You can come back in on the fingers. Hit those really quick. Kind of blend it down so you get those nice sharp hits of light. Come across here, just kind of like, not super heavy, but just a little bit. Just a little, like, couple of touches along that piping, just to give it that little zing. Like the light is catching it, and that's just going to help accentuate kind of the nature of black, as again, black is defined by highlight, whereas white is defined by shadow. Come in like right here on this little U chest piece. Come over here and hit the knuckles a little bit. You don't have to worry about being too regular, because again, you can just kind of use that blending brush as a little bit of a added sheet. Just get the feel of some of those little extra zings of light in there. A little highlight. Help everything kind of pop out just a bit. Not even worry about those boots, because we know no one's going to really look at the boots. We want those to be darker anyway. Let's come in, brighten up right on the chest. There we go. Now our black is hopefully dry. We can add some teeth to his grimace, his angry face, and we can call him complete. So I'm just going to use white sands for this, which is a nice like off-white that we use quite a bit. We used a little bit last week too. And you want to use off-white for teeth and eyes, because obviously it's really unnatural for those things to be like super bright white. Blend those out. So you get just a hint of those teeth in there. Just a little bit more so it'll show up on camera. And then the last thing you can do is we can go in and we can give them a bit of a bottom lip, and that'll help even sell that look a bit more. So for that, you want to take some flesh tone, and then you want to take like an umber or kind of a red brown, or you can mix all kinds of things together to kind of make a bottom lip color. But you're typically not looking, even when you're doing like fancy made-up lady lips, you don't really want to use like a pure bright red. So I'm going to use like the shrapnel red, which is a very red brown, and you're kind of just looking for that purplish red hue of, well, for Caucasian lips anyway. But you can play, like Dallas talks about how there's no right or wrong way to do skin color. There's a lot of flexibility when it comes to how you want to do things, how you want them to kind of show up. I'll go a little bit more red here. And then I'm just going to come in, bottom lip. I'm going to try to avoid hitting the side of that helmet. A little more red. It's going to get a nice ruddy layer in there. So the skin tone, I mean, lips are typically slightly darker than the skin around them, but they're not, you know, they're not crazy so. Again, unless you're wearing lipstick or some kind of makeup, your lip color is just going to be slightly different. So a little ruddier, a little darker. And last but not least, let's grab some more black ink. And we'll just really quickly wash down that piece of masonry. And probably just call that good, since we only have like a minute left. I'm just going to come back in and I'm just going to do this little rock stuff down here one more time. Maybe we'll come back here and hit the back of this boot that we didn't bother painting because no one's ever going to see it, just to help darken it up so that nobody ever will see it. Be in shadow. Putting things in shadow, it's a great trick. Alright, and so outside of some work to do on the base, I would call that a completed Marvel Now inspired Magneto. So I hope you guys and gals and people out there had fun today hanging out, chatting. It's always a pleasure to get to spend this hour with you every week. Be sure to tune in at 1 p.m. on Thursday for Dallas Kemp, as he's going to be finishing out his Magneto, again based off of that black-suited version from X-Men Blue, and the run that was just a couple of years ago. It's looking really great. I can't wait to see what he does. He's doing a lot of glow effects as well, so if you want to push yourself and challenge your painting a little bit more, it's going to be a great way to check out. Overall, I'm very happy with our white Magneto here. I learned a lot of lessons, and I'm a little less concerned about painting white now in the future, and we did it on stream even. Otherwise, folks, just to give you a heads up, we will not be streaming next week. We will be on break, so there won't be any streams next week. If you haven't done so already, though, be sure to submit your challenge for this month, which is hashtag Painting Protocol. We are looking for blue and gold. That is the theme for this month. So be sure to check those out. Otherwise, we will rejoin you in a couple weeks, and be sure to check out the social media and the Facebook for all the greatest and latest information on everything going on. Enjoy the X-Men. We can't wait to see all the pictures and posts that you guys put up for it. And then otherwise, take care. We appreciate y'all, and we will see you on the next one. Goodbye. Fare thee well, humans. I don't think that's what Magneto sounds like at all, but that's what we did, so